What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to my Jiaoqiu or Jiaoxiu pre-release guide, whatever you want to call it, dude. In this video, I'm going to cover everything there is to know about Acheron's best boy Jiaoxiu, including how his kit works, how to build him, pull priority for his E1 or S1, and in which teams does he fit the most. If you enjoy this type of content, let me know by liking the video, leaving a comment in the comment section below, and consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Jiaoqiu is going for Pella and Silverwolf's job as the best debuffer in the game, and he does have a great argument for being the best contender for that role. His kit revolves around inflicting enemies with stacks of Ash and Roast, which makes enemies take more damage. The first stack makes the enemy take 15% more damage from allies, and every stack after that increases that amount by 5% up to a max of 35. Meaning that a fully stacked Ash and Roast enemy will take 35% more damage from allies. The way he inflicts these Ash and Roast stacks is via his talent, which enable him to inflict a stack or have a 100% base chance of inflicting a stack, I should say, whenever he uses his basic, skill, or ultimate. Speaking of his basic, he does 100% fire damage to a single enemy with a chance of inflicting Ash and Roast from the talent. This is 100%. His skill is a blast version of the basic attack, but it has a separate chance of inflicting Ash and Roast aside from the talent, which means you can inflict 2 Ash and Roast on the main target and 1 Ash and Roast to adjacent targets. Now his ultimate is where it gets really insane. When Jiaoqiu uses his ultimate, he deals 100% AoE damage and he literally starts cooking the enemy with a field called the zone, I guess. Whenever this one is active, he first sets all Ash and Roast stacks to the highest amount of Ash and Roast stacks currently on the field. Meaning that if only one enemy has 5 stacks and the rest have 1, when you use the ultimate, it will set all enemies to 5 stacks. Also while in the zone, enemies take 15% extra damage from ults, which is probably one of the reasons why they call him the Acheron best boy or the best partner for Acheron. So in total, enemies will be taking about 50% more damage from ultimates, which is insane. And on top of that, every time the enemies take a turn, they have a 60% base chance to get inflicted by another Ash and Roast stack, and this can activate up to a total of 6 times per ultimate. The zone lasts for 3 turns, and it's conveniently enough time for you to build up your ultimate one more time so you can have 100% uptime on your zone with Jiaoqiu. One little final detail about Ash and Roast is that enemies that have Ash and Roast are also considered to be burned, and they take dot damage equal to 180% of Jiaoqiu's attack every time they start a turn. Not only does he enable the team to deal more damage via his vulnerabilities, he also deals damage himself via his burn dot. Jiaoqiu also has really strong traces. His A1 makes him a pure fiction monster because it inflicts every oncoming enemy with the highest amount of Ash and Roast stacks currently on the field, which means every enemy that comes into the field gets inflicted with, let's say, 5 stacks because somebody on the field already has 5 stacks. That's pretty insane. His second choice converts a portion of his effect hit rate to attack up to a max of 240 attack. To max this out, you would need about 140 effect hit rate, which is conveniently the same amount of effect hit rate you need to guarantee that you land your debuffs at 60% base chance. His final trait just gives him 15 energy straight up, which allows him to fire off his ultimate and start cooking the enemies pretty much on turn 1 if you use your skill. So far he seems pretty autopilot. You throw him out on the field, you use your skill once, you ultimates, and then you just start cooking the enemy with at least 50% vulnerability on ultimate damage and 35% vulnerability on everything else. Now for the build, he has several options. I think 2 different playstyles you can play him. You can play him as a debuffer for 1, and then you can also play him as a dot. The debuffing build also has 2 routes you can take. You can go 2-piece messenger with 2-piece pioneer for a little bit of speed and extra damage dealt to enemies inflicted with debuffs, and considering that he's always going to have somebody debuffed, he's always going to be having that 12% extra damage done active at all times. You could also go for the 4-piece eagle set, which is my personal favorite for the action advance on ultimate, and this is how I plan on playing him. This is how I pre-farmed his relics. Because of how fast he can get his ultimate every 3 turns, action advancing every time he does his ultimate is actually very beneficial. So if that's something you also want to try out, that is also a very viable option when it comes to his build. And then finally, for his dot build, we have a dot set, so just throw the dot set on the dot character. That's pretty simple to me. His planar situation is a little bit nuanced. It has a lot to do with your light cone choices. If you're going for his S1, that you can get away with not using the Pan Cosmic set and instead going for something like Moth or for extra damage, or a Von Walk for extra energy and extra early zone activation. Personally, that's the one I'm going for. I'm going for Von Walk and 4-piece Eagle. I happen to get good stats on those, so that is going to be my build. But if you are running a free-to-play Jiaoqiu, you're going to be better off by running a Pan Cosmic with an Eyes of the Prey at at any super imprison you have. At S5, it gives you 40% effect hit rate. You also have tutorial mission, which also gives you 40% effect hit rate. So you want a light cone that gives you effect hit rate, and most of those give you 40% effect hit rate. The only one that gives you more than that is his own signature light cone that gives you 60% effect hit rate. Now, while speaking about Pan Cosmic, I know it's a pain in the butt to farm, but if you can reach 140 effect hit rate without using Pan Cosmic, then I recommend going for either Glomoth or going for the Van Walk set for extra energy and action advance like your boy, because like I said, farming Pan Cosmic is just really, really bad. For the stats, obviously for the chest, you want effect hit rate chest with the S5 40 effect hit rate light cone like Eyes of the Prey or tutorial mission, and your traces and your chest, you're going to have about a 111.2% effect hit rate, which means you only need about 39 effect hit rate from any other source, and I'm pretty sure you can close that gap with substats pretty or fairly easily. Now, if you're going for his S1, instead of being at 111, you're going to be at 131, which means you're going to need even less substats so you can focus more on speed, and it's just going to work out perfectly. Speaking about speed, you want speed boots 100% of the time with Jiaoqiu. Even though he is a dot character, he gives himself a lot of attack. He gives himself 240% attack if you max out the effect hit rate, so you don't really need the attack boots. So 100% of the time he wants speed boots. He has 103 base when you consider his trace, plus 25, that's 128. So you're going to need a little bit of speed rolls for you to be able to get the speed thresholds, which is 134, 144, and then 160 if you are one of those guys that build 160 speed units. Now, the orb is pretty much open. You can go with whatever you want, really. Fire damage is technically the best because it offers more damage amplification for his dots and his personal damage, but you can actually go for attack as well because it does affect the dot damage, or you can go for defensive stats like defense or HP if you really feel like it. For the orb, just go with the one that has the most effect hit rate and the most speed. If you are close to the 140% effect hit rate already, just go with more speed. And then last but not least, we have the rope, and obviously we want the energy regen rope because you want to fire off your ultimate as much as possible, considering that his gimmick is pretty much tied to his ultimate, and the way that he's going to help characters inflict debuffs is also tied to his ultimate. So in my opinion, you can never have enough energy regen, especially on a character like Jiaoqiu. The most important stat threshold is going to be the 140% effect hit rate threshold that I previously mentioned, because that gives him so many stats and it guarantees that you are going to land your Ashen Rose stacks. So that should be your main priority, getting to 140% effect hit rate. And that's pretty much all he needs when it comes to stats. Like, he just needs effect hit rate and speed, and then you can invest the rest however you feel like it. If he's dying too much, invest in defense. If he's not dying, then invest more in attack and offensive stats. As far as light cone options, he has the solitary healing, which even though it gives you break effect instead of effect hit rate, it allows you to have more energy or regenerate more energy and increases your dot damage by 40%, which is really, really good for him. Another option that also doesn't offer any effect hit rate, but is also a very good and very strong light cone to have, is obviously the Resolution Sign is Pearls of Sweat. Gives you about 16% defense reduction or defense shred when you have it at S5, and it compounds with the vulnerability, so damage amplification is actually pretty significant when you run this light cone with a character like Jiaoqiu. Now, for my favorite free-to-play option is going to be Eyes of the Prey. At S5, it gives you 40% effect hit rate and increases your dot damage by 48%. This light cone right here gives you everything you need. You don't really need his light cone, honestly, unless you're having issues building effect hit rate. But with the Eyes of the Prey giving you 40% effect hit rate and increasing your dot damage by 48%, this light cone actually gives you everything you could ever need in a light cone. The only thing it's missing to be perfect is a little bit of speed, but that's asking too much of a free-to-play 4-star light cone. The last semi-free-to-play option, because this is a light cone that pretty much day one players have, or like patch 1.1 players have, is the tutorial mission or before tutorial mission starts light cone, which also increases your effect hit rate by 40%, and whenever you attack defense reduced enemies, you regenerate 8 energy, which unless you're running somebody like, I don't know, like Pella or something, you're really not going to take advantage of this energy portion, but the effect hit rate is also pretty good. So if you have this light cone, you don't have S5 Eyes of the Prey or his signature light cone, this is probably his third best option. Obviously, Black Swan signature light cone also benefits Jiaoqiu because it gives him 40% effect hit rate, and I've been going crazy about the 40% effect hit rate, but it's because he actually needs a lot of effect hit rate. So 40% effect hit rate is actually really good, and then whenever you stack up his profit, you can probably only stack up to 5% and 7.2 defense ignore via this light cone, just Jiaoqiu by himself, but it is better than nothing. And the 40% effect hit rate is, to me, honestly, it's good enough. And then last but not least, we have his signature light cone, which is going to increase your effect hit rate by 60%, which is insane. And then after you use a basic skill or ultimate, there is a 60% base chance of inflicting on armor to the enemy, which gives him a 10% vulnerability. And if you afflict unarmored again, it's going to transform into cornered, which then adds another 14% vulnerability on top of that for 2 turns, which it counts as another debuff, and it's a 24% vulnerability increase, which means that at E0 S1, Jiaoqiu is going to be providing 74% vulnerability, which is an insane amount of damage amplification. So needless to say, this is his best option, light cone, just by the effect hit rate alone, but then the added effects with the extra debuff, which also benefits the ratio team, is just a cherry on top. This is a masterful light cone right here. Now for the fun part, teams and synergies. Jiaoqiu slots pretty much anywhere that Pella used to slot in, except maybe in ice teams because of Pella's ice resistance reduction. But aside from that, he pretty much goes in wherever you used to have Pella, you're gonna have Jiaoqiu now. But his main selling point is to keep Acheron as the best DPS in the game, and yeah, he pretty much does that. He helps Acheron maintain her role as best DPS in the game. He allows Acheron to stack her ultimate faster than anything you've seen before, and it really doesn't matter. Even though he has a cap of 6 per ultimate launched, it really doesn't make any difference because by the time 6 stacks go by, the enemy should be dead or close to dying anyway, or you should be close to firing off your ultimate again anyway. Whatever the case may be, Jiaoqiu always is going to help Acheron get more, either 1 or 2 more ultimates per cycle. Aside from that, he offers one of the highest debuffing amplifications we have currently in the game, with 100% uptime to everybody on the team, which is one of the main points with Pella. Pella has a little bit of a downtime when it comes to her defense reduction, but that is not a problem with Jiaoqiu. He has 100% uptime on everything he offers 100% of the time. So for a free-to-play team, you're going to be running Acheron, Jiaoqiu, Pella, and Gallagher or Aventurine, whichever one works for you. This team stacks tremendously fast, and everyone contributes to Acheron's damage. Obviously, Acheron is Acheron, Jiaoqiu has the vulnerabilities, Pella has a defense shred, and Gallagher and or Aventurine both have some sort of debuff that allows Acheron to do more damage, Aventurine having the crit damage boost, and Gallagher having the 12% vulnerability. For an E1S1 team, this probably will be the same exact setup, although with the E1S1, you could argue that you can replace Pella. You don't need Pella to help stack anymore, and you can replace Pella here for somebody like Robin or Sparkle if you so choose to. Now for an E2 Acheron team, you have more options, so you can probably go for Acheron, Jiaoqiu, Sparkle, Robin, or Bronya, and then your sustain of choice. This team is going to completely eviscerate any content we have in the game currently. There is nothing that can survive this. This is just an insane team right now. This is with E0 Jiaoqiu, 50% vulnerability. Sparkle, Robin, and Bronya provide so much offensive firepower to Acheron when it comes to crit damage, when it comes to damage bonus, when it comes to attack. All 3 of them are really, really good. And then your sustain of choice can be whoever really. Aventurine and Gallagher obviously are the 2 best ones because they also have debuffs on their kit. But with an E2 Acheron team, you really shouldn't have any problem if you just run one of these options that I just presented to you. Now, another team that hasn't been talked about a lot is going to be the Dr. Ratio team. Jiaoqiu also improves characters like Dr. Ratio because both of his debuffs are up 100% of the time. And this means that Dr. Ratio gets 40% of his follow-up attack activation rate just for free. And if you have his signature light cone, or if you have resolution process sweat, or if you have something like incessant rain, you have an extra debuff that you can stack onto that, which means he has 60% follow-up activation for free. Plus the damage bonus that Dr. Ratio gets from actually the enemy being debuffed, plus the debuff themselves. So Jiaoqiu actually buffs a lot of Dr. Ratio, so a lot of Dr. Ratio mains are going to be very, very happy with pulling Jiaoqiu and throwing him on the team with whoever like Topaz or whoever else. In contrast to running Silverwolf with Dr. Ratio, where she can only debuff 1 person at a time, Jiaoqiu applies 2 to 3 debuffs to everybody at the same time, so Dr. Ratio is always going to have a viable target to hit with his chalk. Last but not least, another team that is going to get a tremendous buff is going to be the Dot team, the Kafka, Black Swan, Jiaoqiu, and Huahua team. This team is going to completely eviscerate everything now because they have a 3rd source of Dot, and that 3rd source of Dot also deals damage and it also amplifies damage. So it's not like you're having a harmony character in there like Ruan-Mei, which used to be the best in slot for them as well, even though Robin is also very good too. Jiaoqiu kind of completes this whole team because now Black Swan is going to have another source of Arcana stacking, and Kafka is going to have another source of dot triggering. Adding Jiaoqiu to this team and swapping Ruan-Mei out actually performs better than keeping the Ruan-Mei in there. In a lot of cases. Not in every case, but in a lot of cases. Lastly, since Jiaoqiu applies vulnerabilities to enemies, and that's how he amplifies damage, it's important for you to know that vulnerability is one part of the damage formula that applies to every single part. Every single type of damage there is, vulnerability applies to. The same thing as defense. That's why applying vulnerabilities and defense reduction are so strong. So the teams I just gave you are just some teams that he performs exceptionally well. But honestly, Jiaoqiu goes in any single team that can benefit from either defense reduction or vulnerability. Any team that needs damage amplified or damage increased, Jiaoqiu is going to perform exceptionally well in that team. Now for a pull priority, I recommend going for S1 first because 60% effect hit rate is something that we don't have in a light cone yet. And it does have the highest amount of effect hit rate available in light cone form. So if you have a character like Black Swan with no light cone, that light cone works for Black Swan. It works for Sampo, it works for Pella, it works for pretty much anybody. Pretty much works for anybody that needs effect hit rate, especially if they are a dot character. For instance, like Guanaifin or Black Swan. His E1 allows your entire team to deal 40% more damage, which is actually insane, and it helps him stack Ash and Rose a little bit faster. Now, when we're talking about E2 and above, it makes Jiaoqiu Now for E2 and above, it starts converting Jiaoqiu into more of a dot centric character because E2 it pretty much shoots his dot damage through the stratosphere. It adds 300% to his dot damage, which is actually insane. His E4 is pretty mid, it just reduces enemies attack by 15%. And then the E6 ups the Ash and Rose limit to 9 instead of 5, and then also reduces the enemies of all type res pen by 3% per stack, which means that if you have everything stacked up, you have 55% vulnerability and 27% all type res reduction to the enemy, which is absolutely disgusting. And this is without the S1. All right, guys, that's going to be it for my Jiaoqiu guide. Let me know what you guys think. Are you going to be pulling for him for your Acheron team, for your dot team? Why are you going to be pulling for Jiaoqiu, or why are you not going to be pulling for Jiaoqiu? Leave it in the comment section below. And until next time, guys, see ya.